about APA style and academic writer is just that while we can help you with using academic writer and accessing it through like I said, whatever means you use, your course, your library, etc. And our APA style expert team can help you with some of those guidelines. Your instructor or department or school may have different requirements. And while you are in school, you will definitely want to defer to those, even if it does contradict what academic writer or even the pub manual says at this time, right? Just because they're the ones grading you. So do keep that in mind. Let's see, how do I do this? Okay. So one thing that I wanted to get started with is just kind of putting academic writer in context with APA style and the publication manual. So the publication manual of the American Psychological Association sets forth the guidelines of APA style. So this was started back, I think in the 1920s or 30s, and not codified in the first edition until 1952, as mentioned here, by the editors of the Psychological Bulletin, which was a publication of the American Psychological Association, just to standardize articles that were being submitted. Having a standard form allows your readers, in this case, maybe your instructor who is grading your paper, to really focus on the content of your paper and not necessarily the way that it is being presented. This means that all of your citations look the same and your citations look the same as your classmates, and it just makes it a lot easier to read and understand, which we definitely want to put our instructors in a good mood when we are being graded. Um, if you are required to have a hard copy of the publication manual, this cover might look familiar to you. You can't see in this little image all of the nice little tabs that define these 12 different sections of the pub manual. Uh, so with those different sections, the focus is on, like I said, presenting your content or presenting any content in a clear, concise, organized way. And so while we think of writing styles, and not just APA style, but also, you may be familiar with MLA if you use that in high school. Folks who are history majors may use something called Turabian. So there's like a lot of different styles. Nursing students may be familiar with AMA, which is the American Medical Association, which is very specific and has some really weird abbreviations, but we won't get into that this evening. Writing style is set forth to, again, to standardize presentation so that you can focus on content. And so while we think of that maybe as how should my in-text citations be formatted? How do I put things in quotes? How do I punctuate things? It is also much more than that. It goes beyond those kind of what we think of as mechanics of style and starts getting into things like how we talk about certain groups of people or populations. So if you are a psychology student and looking at, certain groups of people, how do we talk about them with dignity and respect? It also standardizes things like ethical standards in research, and things like that. So definitely really important to think about as you progress through your academic program. Um, so now that we have a little bit of background on what APA style is and why we would use a style, we are going to dive into how academic writer can help you not only learn about that style, but also apply it in your research and writing. I mentioned for the publication manual the different sections of it, and we'll see how that is reflected in Academic Writer, the platform. So I am going to jump out of this presentation, yeah, and get into Academic Writer. So hopefully you are seeing the Academic Writer homepage right now.
Looks good.
Awesome, thank you. Um, So, if you are accessing the Academic Writer homepage, so if you're accessing through your library, this is likely the page that you're landing on. If you have particular assignments in an individual course, you may land somewhere in the Learning Center, and we'll look at that content in just a moment. But I did just want to point out on the homepage some other items. The Getting Started with Academic Writer tutorial, as well as the Writing in Academic Writer lessons, are always available here, and we'll go through some of the things that we are talking about tonight. So if you have to step away or you forget everything that I've said, that's cool. That information is always going to be available for you here on the homepage. Um, we have content of Academic Writer organized into three different what we call centers. So the Learning Center, Reference Center, and Writing Center. And we'll dig into each of those now. So in the Learning Center, we have lessons and samples. So samples in terms of sample papers, references, tables, and figures. So this may be what you're used to if you've used the publication manual or other online resources for APA style, where it gives you an example of how your reference might look in your reference list. And so one of the things that I really like about this is that how it shows you the double space, the hanging indent, things like that. So you can always look at those. And again, these different sections where you can filter to just what you're looking for. So if you have a journal article, one of the things that was specific is from the up-to-date database, is actually categorized in journal articles. That's something that we get asked about with enough frequency that we added it to the platform. So for those of you in health sciences programs, that might be something that you refer to. Um, the other thing here is quick guides and tutorials. And so when we look at this content, these lessons and the quick guides relate to specific guidelines from the publication manual. So we talked about all of those different sections. And so the Learning Center is going to address, I think it's sections 1 through, what section is this? 8. And so that is things like paper elements or components, journal articles, reporting standards, grammar, bias-free language, the mechanics of style. And you can see some of those phrases in the filters here. So those do relate, like I said, to specific guidelines set forth in the publication manual. So another really helpful thing about these lessons then and their and the relation to the pub manual is linking you to those specific pages in the that come from the publication manual. So if you have an instructor that's a real stickler for APA style, you can always refer to the content presented in the way that they may be more familiar with, like from the publication manual, as opposed to the presentation in the interactive lesson. So for those of you with assignments, I do want to go through some of this just so you kind of can familiarize yourself with what that might look like. So you can go through the content. The overview is just going to let you know what will be covered, and then what the objectives of the lesson are. The objectives are, I point out specifically because the number of questions in the knowledge check and the quiz at the end of the lesson relate to the number of the objectives. So as you scroll through the content and go through that, we can see that over here on the right-hand side in this navigable content, it is checking off the sections as I go through them, and it's telling me what percentage I have completed. Um, in the event that you need to leave this page before you're finished, you can always go to the My Lessons section and pick back up where you left off. So when you return to Academic Writer, we can go back, I can resume, and this is going to land me right where I left off. So assuming we've gone through all of this content, we can use the knowledge check to test our knowledge of the content that we have just gone through. So you can select the answers to the questions and get immediate feedback that I didn't select all of the correct answers. So I would have also wanted to make sure that I check that. And go on to the next question. Uh, Afterwards, there is also a review that you can go through. In addition to the learn more, again, just referring you back to the very specific sections of the publication manual before you get to a quiz. Just note that you do have 3 attempts on the quiz. So this is unlike the knowledge check, this is graded, so it's not going to um, give you the same feedback. Lot number you finished using parenthetical and narrative. So when I submit this, it just goes on to the next question. And then when you are finished, it will show you a grade in the same way that the knowledge check did, where it said, I guess I didn't finish the knowledge check. We can look at another example. Let's see. So for example, here, I think I can show you here. Like, so for example, I only got a 20%. The platform considers 80% passing. So if I were taking this for a grade, I would want to take this again in order to try to get a better score. But because I did go through all of the content, I am able to go to my lessons and check and export my proof of completion, which downloads as a PDF, so we can see that I took the lesson, the date that I took it, and the score that I got on the quiz. So in case your instructor needs more specific proof that you have completed an assignment, you're able to show that.
Hey, Dawn.
Yeah.
We did have a question just about the progress features and if they are new and how recent.
Sure. So some things are new and some things are not. So good question. The progress has always been tracked here, through the check marks on the particular sections, and the little progress, at the top of that column. However, the certificates, with the proof of completion, score, and date are new. So I hope that that helps. Are there any other questions about the Learning Center before we move on to the Reference Center?
Not right now.
Okay, sounds good. Obviously, if you have any questions, Emily is here to help and to chime in when needed. So we will go ahead and move on to the reference center. So the reference list addresses sections 9 and I think 10 of the publication. Well, I guess the Learning Center is the sample references that are in section 10. So the reference center is kind of section 9 of your publication manual. And this talks about um, how you can build a specific collection of references in your academic writer account. Um, so a couple things. So I got to the reference center navigating through the toolbar on the top. You can also get to the reference center if you're in sample references and you want to get to that, we can go directly to that form. And again, we're in the reference center. So there's a lot of different ways to get to each of the areas of academic writer. I want to first show you the collection of references and what that looks like, and then we'll talk about different ways that you can add those and some of the tips that I like about using the forms and academic writer in general to keep that collection. Um, so when you view your personal collection of references, you'll see that they get organized in the way that you might expect to see those in an APA style formatted reference list. They are alphabetical by author's last name. If there's not an author, we have the year. Um, we have the double spaced hanging indent. We use last names and initials and appropriately punctuate and italicize and all of that. You do get additional information about the reference based on how you added it. So in this particular reference from the DSM, I can see that it has been imported. I can see that the file name where I uploaded it from, like what I selected as the source. When you upload references, the source can be important just because of how things get formatted. The abstract is included here because again, that was part of my reference file. And I can see that I have cited this in 3 of my papers and I can see which papers those were. For others, you can see if there is not an associated paper. I haven't cited this anywhere. If I am a particularly organized student, I might go ahead and delete that if it is not something that I use, so it doesn't clutter my collection. You can also see on a few of these that I have these clickable tags. So for these, I have you added a tag, and we'll look at those in the reference forms in just a moment. Oh. So looking at my collection of references versus adding references. So there's a few different ways that I'm going to talk about right now. You can create a reference from any one of these linked forms. So I like to show the website form here because it's something that you would probably not be able to import, that you would need to fill out the form for. You're able to import references from your like research databases. So for those peer-reviewed journal articles that you're required to have in your assignments, you can export those from the database and then add them here to your academic writer account. But for things online, we will probably need to fill out the form. So the kind of components of your reference list entry are really just saying who wrote it, when was it written, what is it called, and how do I get it? And so whether this is because your instructor wants to check a resource that you used, or maybe you have really piqued their interest on a topic and they would like to do some further reading and actually go to your sources, that they would actually be able to find the source that you used. Um, if the forms seem daunting, it can seem like a lot of information, even when we do just think about it as a who, when, what, how. We can collapse all of the fields and just kind of expand what we need as we're working through it. So in terms of the author, whether that is an individual or group, one of the things that I really like here is the prompt to enter just the information that APA style likes to have in the reference list entry. You may have recalled that I mentioned that reference list entries have just the last name and then initials. Like we don't use full first names or just last names. We need last names as well as any initials that the author uses. So if I use, if I have four names and I use three initials in my surname, all of that needs to be included. So it's just a reminder to enter that here appropriately. For the date, again, just prompting for what the APA style requires for this particular type of resource. So for web pages, we definitely need a year, but if you have additional information, go ahead and enter that. Um, for things like journal articles, APA style only requires a year because additional date information comes from the volume and issue number. And so on that form, it prompts you for just the year and then asks you for the volume and issue number. Um, the title, and then prompts and assistance in formatting and sentence versus title case. And so obviously you would just need to proofread that. Like the form doesn't necessarily know what a proper name is in a title, but can be really helpful if you need that reminder or assistance there. Um, like I said, there are other fields here that you don't necessarily need to use, but can be really helpful. One of the things that I like is this saved quotation. So if you're quoting something directly as opposed to synthesizing and summarizing the information, you can put that direct quote here and those will be saved in that list that we viewed when we first landed in the reference center. Can be really helpful if you notice that you have a number of quotes from the same resource. Maybe you are using it in a variety of papers throughout your course or throughout your program, but maybe it's like seminal literature in your discipline. But maybe you should vary your sources depending, right? So it's just again just kind of something to help you kind of, get kind of that like overview of the resources that you're using. Um, so for things like journal articles or book chapters and things like that. There's also a field for the abstract. We saw that earlier. Um, you can also add notes. So this is, just kind of your personal notes. Maybe you want to say something, like, oh, I found this, but I think I can find something that better aligns with my thesis or, whatever note you want to leave yourself, as well as the tags. Um, yes. So the other thing, I mentioned the reference tags. We can see here, all of these things are searchable. Any text that you put in any of the reference form fields are searchable. So those notes that you leave to yourself, the reference tags, the title, the author, any field is searchable. But I do like to kind of point out that kind of being able to look at these tags and thinking about your notes um, is really going to help, and being organized in that is really going to help when you are looking for these references in your collection in order to cite in your paper. And so we'll see what that looks like in a moment. I am going to make a quick note of one of these tags so I can show you what that looks like in real time. So let's remember multicultural as the tag that we're going to look for when we are looking for references to cite in our paper. Um, are there any other questions? Oh, I need to talk about importing. I talked about it so much and then I didn't even talk about it. Importing, so I mentioned that when you import references, it's likely going to come from research database when you're searching for journal articles. If you're already using any sort of reference management software, you can go ahead and export the citation, or I guess the references, so the reference information from that reference management software and put it into your academic writer account. And obviously the benefit of that is going to be the formatting, citation, and reference list help that is provided in the Writing Center, which we'll have a look at in a moment. So like I said, you'll just want to make sure that you select the correct source so that academic writer knows what field to put the information in. Different sources will label those fields differently. Like, so for example, some programs and databases label the journal title field with J and some use JO. So it's just making sure that the information gets into the right field. Um, choose a file from your computer that you've saved, and again, whether that's from a database or other reference management software, and upload it. You'll have a chance to review, proofread, and save those to your collection where it will note that it's imported. Um, so we can see like this came from a ProQuest database. This one was not imported. We have the direct quotes, so I can see, I have a number of quotes with that particular resource. So when we move into the Writing Center, we'll see why having this collection of references can be really helpful. But I just want to pause a minute and see if there's any questions about the Reference Center before we move on.
Nothing about references. Someone just did ask about the recording, and we are recording, and we will make sure to send that out after the webinar.
Okay, sounds good. Getting into the Writing Center, I am going to select Write a New Paper just to show the options here for paper templates. So you may want to use the basic paper, which is just a blank template that's going to allow you to add any sections that you need for your specific assignments based on your instructor's requirements. However, we do have some pre-formatted templates that are going to populate heading labels that one would expect to find in a paper of that type. So for example, if we choose like methodological, we'll say this is a webinar draft. I can either immediately add references or start writing. And for this particular paper, there aren't necessarily sections. I think it's the empirical paper that has I always pick that wrong. This is what I meant. So, draft. Yep. So this shows the headings that one would expect to find, as well as just a little reminders what content would be in there. But once you start typing, those little reminders go away. One of the things that is related, in addition to these headings, one of the other things that's related to the template that you select is going to be the related help. So I clicked on the question mark here, just above the toolbar, and I can see the related help specific to the empirical paper. So again, that reminder of what is in each section, right? Because when I started typing over the method, this text went away, but it's still here. Um, Additionally, there are the general writing advice is going to appear in every single paper template. So that's always there for you if you need some guidance on that. Talking about headings and just kind of some ways to think about organizing the content of your paper. So that is there. I'm going to jump over to a paper that already has some text in it so we can look at some of the more specific features of how Academic Writer can help you apply APA style guidelines. Um, So we mentioned those headings, and you can see when there is more content in the paper, how that can be super helpful to have those headings listed over here because on the left, because that is also a navigable outline for you, and you can click into those areas. Um, these little icons here are for collaboration. So if you are working on a group project or you maybe need a TA or instructor assistant, you just want to add them as a reviewer to your paper, they can read a draft or something like that, and comment on it. You can do that, and you can manage that up at the top. Um, I just want to go back up to a section with text. As I move my mouse through some of the text here, you may see some of the text, some of these citations are highlighting yellow when the mouse is over them. Obviously, you can't see me moving my mouse, but you can see the cursor here, and that there is a dotted line underneath that text. And so what that tells me is that I've used Academic Writer in order to help me format that in-text citation. And so what that might look like is I'm just going to go ahead and delete this one and add something that maybe makes a little more sense. Or less questions. So I can add an in-text citation in a few different ways. So I know that my cursor is right here after the word questioned. I can use the menu to find and cite a reference. I can also right click to access that same menu. I really like that because then I know my citation's going in the correct place. The other way that you can do that is if you scroll just past the body of your paper here, you can see all of your what we call paper assets. So it's not the text of your paper, but it's everything else. So your references, tables, figures, all of that good stuff. Um, you can access your references there. So you can see there's a few toggles here. Let me scroll up a little here so this is easier to see for you. The paper reference list versus my references. So my references is going to be that whole collection that we just looked at in the reference center, whereas paper reference list is going to be a little bit shorter list of references that I have associated with this particular paper. Um, So whether you did that either through adding them through in-text citation here, like we're doing right now, or you already knew you did your research already and you know what references and articles you want to use in your paper and you added them before you started writing. Maybe your instructor had you do an annotated bibliography and before you did your paper, so you might already have some references associated because of that. Um, so like I said, I like the right click. Again, just making sure the reference goes in the correct place to find and cite reference. And this will show you a few options. I can just search my paper reference list. What was the multicultural? So this was that tag that I mentioned. So nothing was in my paper reference list. I will search all of my references. Why? I want to search tags. I have to tell it I want to search tags. I also need to spell things correctly. So in my references, we can see that all of those tagged references are going to show up here. So I want to select the reference that I want to cite. You can select more than one. So for example, if you're trying to say, a number of studies have shown that the grass is green and the sky is blue, you can, select the 4 studies that came to that conclusion. Um, there are going to be a few different kind of questions you need to answer depending on how you do that. Um, so when I select one reference and cite it, I'm going to answer a few questions here. So is this parenthetical or narrative? And if you don't know what that means, that's fine. We can get a little bit more information from the question mark. So is it parenthetical where you're not including any of the citation information in your writing? Or is it narrative where you're saying, for example, author names found that the grass is green and the sky is blue, or maybe they found the opposite and that's why you're calling them out on it. You can select the appropriate option there. So in this case we'll say that it's parenthetical. And this is the direct quote option that I kind of mentioned when we were talking about the reference center. Now obviously you would not have this if you selected more than one reference to cite in the text, right? Because you're not going to have a direct quote from 4 different resources. So if I do select the direct quote option, I'm going to need to provide more specific information. So again, it's just that findability for your readers. And then adding the specific quote if I want. So I'll say that I summarize this. It's parenthetical, it's not a direct quote. When I submit, I find that the citation has been added to the body of my paper, formatted correctly. Because of the number of authors, it's adding the lead author et al. And no date for, or ND for no date. Obviously, if there is that year, that gets added appropriately. So I can continue to type here, and then punctuate my sentence as needed, or, if that's the end of my sentence, put my period outside of the parentheses because that's what APA style says, um, which we would have learned back in the Learning Center under the mechanics of style in punctuation. Um, so a couple other things, there's spell check. There's kind of a grammar and writing check that you can see is toggled on. If that's distracting to you, you can always turn that off and then turn it back on when you're, close to finish or finish with your paper, just to have that kind of check in your mind before you run any other check services on your paper. So we have a more thorough writing check, and this is going to check your paper for you know, overused phrases, transitions in order to ensure varied and interesting writing. So we can view that report. And so it'll show you certain phrases. Um, so some things, if you have a particularly like long name of a study or test or something like that that might be interpreted as a phrase, you know, it checks that, but you can choose to ignore it. It just does, just kind of goes through the text of your paper and can analyze that based on the words that you used, which is again like kind of how it's getting this transition check. Um, so it's showing me that in order to contrast ideas, I was able to use these varied, contrast words in my writing. Um, so the percentage here is, shows 18%, whereas the suggested is more than 25. And again, just to add that variety and interest to keep your reader, kind of so they don't get bored. And focus on the content of the paper. So that is the check the writing. Check headings and unbalanced headings just to make sure things are nested correctly. You can't have a level two without, underneath level one, you need to go, in that sequential order. And so, it's probably just an oversight, but to just make sure that that is correct before you get graded on that. Um, so for me, the best feature of the check services is the match reference citations. And this is specific to APA style, is that everything that's cited in your paper needs to have a reference list entry, and everything that there are like two exceptions, but for this purpose. Everything that's cited in your paper must have a reference list entry, and everything in your reference list must be cited in your paper. An academic writer is going to check for that. So what it's going to do is go through and put a little red flag next to everything that I didn't use that find and cite feature in order to cite in the body of my paper. It's not going to do anything. It's not going to delete or add any citations or references, but it's just going to flag it and say like, hey, like kind of just raise your hand. What about me? And then I can make the decision that, oh, well, I didn't end up needing to use that resource, or, oh, this was super important. This was definitely an oversight. Um, I want to go back and make sure that I cite this where appropriate in the text of my paper. Um,
Hey, Dawn.
yeah,
We did have a question about the checking. So Seema wanted to know, does it automatically check if the paper is APA compliant? And could you talk about other things like double spacing and the indents?
sure. Um, like I said at the beginning, APA style compliance is it shouldn't be, but can be subjective based on instructor requirements. But in terms of things like setting up the paper, academic writer will set up the paper according to APA style guidelines, which provides for 1 inch margins all around, double space, 12 point Times New Roman, which, and I know that there's a lot more variation there in terms of, quote unquote, acceptable typefaces now. But academic writer will set it up in that way. In the event that you do need to change that, you can in the settings. So whether that is font and line spacing, If you're writing a thesis and you're going to end up printing this and you need 1.5 inch margins on the left-hand side for binding, you can set that. Um, the indents are going to um sorry, getting back to the body of my paper. When I enter to start a new line, it will automatically indent for the paragraph. If I needed for whatever reason to do that, it's your standard word processing tools. If we preview the paper, we can see let's go to the beginning of it. 20, why can't I 23? Um, the beginning of the reference list, it does do the double spaced with the hanging indent. So I'm not sure what indentation the question was referring to, but I hope that answered. If not, let us know and we will go back to that. Um, So the last thing that I did want to show, like I said, the settings, you can, kind of fix any of those based on instructor preference, is the need to export, and whether that is emailing the paper as an attachment to your instructor or downloading your paper as a Word or PDF. A lot of institutions now require you to run that Word document through, you know, plagiarism checkers, turn it in or whatever. So you can do that, and then you can upload that to your course, based again on your assignment requirements. Um, So I think I briefly mentioned some of the other options that we kind of see here. So that was the majority of the content that I wanted to talk about this evening. I think we had some good questions. While you are thinking about other questions that you might have, I'm just going to go through some of the kind of extra things that academic writer can help with. Um, we saw the preview. This can be really helpful as you're getting towards the end of your paper. This one still has the running head. Your instructor may or may not require that. You can just kind of see what it looks like. I mentioned the collaborate, so we can add folks, whether it's group project and you need a collaborator or you need a TA or instructor to give you some feedback at the outset of your writing. You can add them as a reviewer where they can't edit anything. You can do that in the collaborate tab. Um, I mentioned the question mark over here. We have some other features that you can access in this right-hand column. The comments, so whether that is comments from your collaborators or comments that you want to notes you want to leave to yourself in a specific place, so we can see that, right? This comment goes with this particular highlighted text. Um, Additionally, for this particular paper, all of the paper sections are already active. So we can see that in the abstract and the keywords over here in the author's notes. So if you start a paper on a student template, it's not going to require the author notes, abstract, and keywords. But I do know that instructors will frequently ask students to get practice writing an abstract. Are you able to summarize your paper, whatever your capstone project of, 20 or 30 pages in 200 words. And so you can add that section here. Um, what else? We note that there's an exclamation point, so it looks like there are some items. This is probably in my references, where I have some information missing and whether that's a year for something or, more specific date information, I can go ahead and check those and add that. Um, Emily, you think there's anything else that we should talk about?
Hmm. Did you show the title page?
I did not show the title page. I talked about it. We previewed it.
Yeah.
So I mentioned that you can edit your title at any time. So you're just going to go to your title page. You can do that. You can get help formatting that. If you need to add the running head for a student paper, you can add that. This was started on the professional template. So assuming for submission for publication where that would be required. I can also move to the author name, and I can add any authors here. So let's say I helped with this paper. I can go ahead and give myself a title. Let's be the fourth. And add my institutional affiliation here, and add to the author list. So I'm added here. And so again, for group projects, things like that, you can add and remove, edit, if Andrew's not a very good leader and I decide that, I need to be the lead author on here, we can reorder folks in that way. Authors aren't necessarily alphabetical. You can determine that. So you can order and reorder those as needed there. Title authors. Yeah. I did mention annotated bibliography, so I do just want to show real quick, in the research lab book, that's where you would find the annotated bibliography, if that is a requirement. I think that your instructor will probably have a lot more, guidance for you on their requirements for that, but you can format that, in Academic Writer. And again, just kind of taking care of some of that formatting that I know can be a real pain in terms of the double-spaced hanging indent, which is, just so annoying. Any other questions that have come up?
I don't see. And oh wait, maybe one more. Let's see.
Uh,
I guess could you expand on lead author
oh,
uh
sure. Let's,
in the title page?
oh, well, we can look at it in the reference list. So for example, any of these here, this reference has a number of authors and they're not necessarily in alphabetical order. I think that one actually is, but you don't have to put them in alphabetical order. Like, so for example, it's Abella McIntyre Smith and then DeChef, right? So if this were in true alphabetical order, DeChef would have come before McIntyre, but it's up to the authors how they present that. Typically there is a lead author. They're the ones who are listed first. With the way that APA style goes now, the in-text citation is just going to be that lead author's name. So, if you want to be that person, be the lead author.
Yep. They might be thinking, so it should be alphabetical on your actual references page, but when you list the authors here in the actual reference, the first author listed is often like the most, I guess, responsible for the
Yeah,
work.
yeah. Um, yeah. Oh, that might have been confusing the way that I talked about that. Yeah. Thank you for clarifying.
You got it.
Um, So, if there's no more questions right now, the last thing that I want to talk about is how to get in touch with us when you do have questions. So at the bottom of every single page, there is a link for site help, which is going to go to what we call our learning commons. So if you have a question about completing any sort of task in Academic Writer, like adding references to your paper, you can find that information here. And again, just the ability to search up there at the top. If you still can't find what you're looking for, are not able to complete what you think you should be able to do in Academic Writer, you can always contact us here. This is going to give us a little bit more information so that we can, provide the best, most specific answer as fast as possible. Because if we have to do a lot of back and forth, that's not productive. So as much information as you can give to us here in this description, we would appreciate it. Knowing your school as well as the email address that's used for your Academic Writer account can also be super helpful. And again, I think for those of you who were here at the very beginning, I mentioned that most of you are probably accessing Academic Writer through your course or library. But if you don't have access for whatever reason, providing your school and email address are going to be the best ways for us to investigate why you can't access Academic Writer in the way that you think you should be able to. So if you have any other questions, you can always come to this area and contact us. So if there aren't any other questions, I am going to go ahead and stop the screen share. And Emily, if you could stop the recording, I would appreciate it. Thank you for doing that.
Got it.
Um, but thank you so much, everyone, for